Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to this week's video. In this week's video, what we're going to do is we're going to cover a pressure pad sort of button switch idea. And I've gone for like a portal style theme. So as you can see here, we've got a pressure pad. Now, when you stand on it, you get this nice animation for the button so that you've actually pressed it. And also that it links to this ramp over here, which you can see animating into the scene and back out of the scene. And essentially what you can do, now this actual pickup feature is going to be a bit of a bonus feature for you. I'm not going to talk through it, I will just sort of put the code down below for you to add this to your game. I've not fully tested it, so if it does bug out, just let me know and I'll try and fix it. It's just sort of like a perk for this. And essentially, yeah, you can drop this cube then onto the pressure pad, and again it animates as you'd expect. And then you can get to the top of this platform, and then you can sort of pick up this cube and take it off, and the platform disappears. So that's pretty much what we're going to cover. We're going to cover the pressure pad and the animation of the two, and then them linking together. So then you've got this sort of switch thing, and I'll briefly show you the movement of this object, like this physics object. But again, I'm not gonna talk through it. I'm just gonna show you how to get it into your project. So with that being said, let's get into it. Okay, so in Unreal 5, you've got on the new levels, like this is the third-person template. What you've got is you've got these sort of prototyping shapes. So you've got ramps, circles, and cubes, like you normally would. And what you can do is let's just slightly adjust this one a little bit, just to be a bit longer. And then what we'll do, we'll move it all the way up to this this sphere. I mean, you can do whatever you want, what suits your level. So with that being the right shape and size, essentially we just need it to animate where it starts maybe underneath the ground and then it just reveals itself. So to animate that, it's really simple. With this shape being selected, this is just a basic static mesh. But what you can do is, here in the details panel, there's a convert this actor to a reusable blueprint. If we hit that, it'll ask us what sort of name that we want to give it and what the sort of parent class should be. This is a static mesh actor. We'll just leave it as that. And what we're going to do is we'll call this triggered ramp. So I'm going to hit select, and that should bring up the blueprint window. So here you can see it's copied in the exact same dimensions that we've just set it up, but we've got a static mesh component. And then what we need to do is go to the event graph. Now we are going to rig this to activate when we stand on the pressure plate, but just for testing purposes, we'll have an event begin play, and then we'll do a delay. And if we set this delay to maybe something like 3 seconds, or you could have even longer, but again, we are going to remove this and have it triggered by the pressure plate. And then what we want to do is we want to add a timeline. Timeline. There we go, add timeline. I'm just going to call this timeline move. Get this a bit closer. Now this links to the player by default, which is absolutely fine. And then to add a track to our timeline, what we want to do is just double click on timeline. And then we're going to add a track and add a float track. And I'm going to call this alpha. And you'll understand why I'm going to call it alpha in just a minute. And then what we're going to do is hold shift at time 0. And you probably will need to change the time up here because it always puts decimal places. So set that to 0. The value is going to remain 0, and then again we're going to place another one, and we're going to have this set to 1 and the value set to 1. So what we want to do is as well, we need to change the length of this track to only 1, and then you can press the zoom to fit horizontal and vertical, and it'll fit nicely on here. Now what this is going to do is quite abruptly, it's just going to change from with basically over a time frame of a second, it's going to go from 0 to 1. Now this is just going to be quite, I say quite abrupt, but it doesn't smooth in and doesn't smooth out. So what you want to do is on your sort of time zero value 0 is right click and select auto. As you can see now, this curve, it actually slowly fades into a movement and then slowly comes to a stop. So it's not just a straight movement, it's a sort of gradual freezing. What you could do is you could change that back to linear and see what the difference makes, but it always looks smoother with this set to auto like that. Anyway, with that being said, we can now close the move template. And you can now see we've got an alpha node. So what we're going to do is we're going to update the location of our ramp, and we're going to do that with a set world location, and we're actually going to be setting the static mesh component of this actor. So we'll pull this down, we'll move that up, and we're actually going to use the alpha to help us with this. So you can see the new location is here, but it's a vector. But if we right click and we split this, it splits into 3 floats, the X, Y and the Z. So our alpha is going to help us change this location from being underneath the map to being above the map. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a lerp, and we're going to plug this alpha into the alpha of the lerp. So that's why we call it alpha. Now what we need to do is we need to go back to our map and we need to find out what the current sort of location is and what we want to change it to. Because the way that a lerp works is as it changes from 0 to 1, it changes which of these values it's going to return. So for example, when the alpha is set to 0, which it will be at the very beginning, it will be 100% of A. So whatever our default location is going to be A. But as this second goes by, as our timeline plays and we get to that second, our value is going to become 1, which means that we're going to have 100% of B. So essentially, by having this timeline fade from 0 to 1, we're allowing our value to slowly change. So that will end up being our new Z location or Z location. So like I said, let's go back to the map, and we can see here that currently our location on the Z is 0, but our default location is going to be not visible, so it's going to be minus 100. So if we go back, our default location is going to be minus 100, and we're going to want to go to 0. So we don't actually need to change B, because that's actually right. Now, if you also look, we've got a new X and a new Y. Our X is 2000 and our Y is 600. Now yours might be different and you might want to move it around, so you don't want to change that. So what you can do is you can get your let's have a look. Let's move this and let's get world location. Let's move this back just a little bit so we can make space for this. What we can do is we can split this, and we'll plug the X into there and the Y into there. We'll move this lerp here. So you can see that we're taking the original X and Y values, so that they essentially don't change unless you move it. And we're only adjusting this, this said value. So let's compile that. So we're going to wait 3 seconds, and then hopefully we should have an animated ramp. So let's press play. After 3 seconds. Oh, I know what we've not done. So it's tried to update, but by default, a static mesh component is set to static. So as you can see here on the right hand side, with the static mesh component selected, it's set to static, but we need to set it to movable. So then it can actually be moved through the level. So if we hit play now, hopefully we've not forgot anything else. After 3 seconds, our ramp appears. So that's the animation itself's has been sorted. And this is now just waiting for a pressure pad to exist, so then we can trigger it off a pressure pad. So hit save, that's all good to go. So now we need a pressure pad. So for the pressure pad, what we've got is, what I did was I went to the modeling mode of Unreal 5, go to modeling, and I selected box. And by default it just gives you a cube. Now that's too high for me, so I'm just going to go for a height of maybe 5. 5's probably good enough. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to set the width to 120 and I'm going to set the depth to 120. And this gives me something slightly bigger than a meter. Well, it's 1.2 obviously. And then when you click, obviously you've created it. Now you can see here in the static mesh we've got box 28DACCFF. Now because we've generated this, because we've clicked, this actually saves now in the sort of content folder as a static mesh. Now if I click on this, you can probably see here's a ton more that I've already made as I've been testing this, but you can see our new ones here. So what we can do is we can change this to 100 now, and another 100, and we can create another one. So what we've got is we've got the two parts of our pressure pad. Now we just need to assemble them together. So I'm going to go back now to the select mode, and just before I do anything, what I'm probably going to do is just change the material. And UE5 comes with a nice grid material. Now they've got a dark version and they've got a light version. So you can see here, this is the dark version, this circle here on the screen, and then the actual floor is the light version. So if I have my pressure pad base set to the dark version, and then if I go and put the switch, let's move this up, and then we set this to grid and then grey. So this is the button that you saw in the demo. It's basically just the dark grey on the bottom and the light grey on the top. Now, this is just the aesthetic that we want to achieve, but unfortunately we can't just select both of these and make a blueprint out of it. We're going to select the bottom one. And similar how we did the ramp, what we're going to do is we're going to convert this into a reusable blueprint. And again, it's going to be a static mesh. Now, because I've still got my pressure pad made, I'm going to call this one pressure plate. You call it whatever you want. And by the way, this doesn't have to be pressure pads or anything like that. You could also make a button that you press. We're going to do an overlap, but you could do sort of like a press E to activate, or you could also have an automated door where you're going to follow. Again, you can follow the same overlap event we're going to do now, but what the thing I'm getting at is you don't have to do a pressure plate. You can sort of trigger this ramp anywhere that you want using the same sort of system. So anyway, with that being said, let's select that. So similarly to the ramp, it's kept our dimensions and our material. But we need the button on the top. So with the static mesh component selected, go to add and add a new static mesh. I'm going to call this button. And it doesn't have a static mesh by default. So if we click none, click none. Our newest button should be, or sort of our newer sort of asset here, which is box 0B26, should be the top. So if I select that, and then I'm going to move this up to 5, and then it hasn't remembered the material, so that's fine. We'll just click on the material, type grid, and we'll go to grey. So now we've got that pressure plate that we made. So let's hit compile now. Just before we continue, what I do want to make sure as well is, because we did stack them two meshes up, if you move your pressure plate out of the way, you'll see this floating box. Just delete that, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line this up with the grid on the floor, just for some aesthetics. So that should be fine. Got a pressure plate. Let's go back now and code the rest of it. So for us to stand on this and actually have an action happen, we also need a collision box on the top, and this is going to act as our trigger. It's going to detect when we stand on it or we put sort of like a cube on it. So with the static mesh component selected again, press add and then type box, and you should have box collision, and we can now just adjust that. So just one thing I want to make clear is make sure that your box isn't underneath your button like this. The reason being is when your button moves, your box will move too, and that'll cause us some issues later on. So if your box is under your button, just drag the box onto the button and it'll disassociate it and it'll keep it under the static mesh. So let's just adjust this. At the moment, that's far too big for me, so I'm going to do 0.1 for the height, and now it's probably inside. I'm just going to switch to a front view and just zoom in a little bit just so I can get a better view. So that's probably a bit too high. I'll probably want it in between, so 15. That's probably fine. And to be fair, that's actually pretty good as is. I'm not going to expand it anymore, so I'm not going to make it right to the edge, and that's really because the collision boxes on characters are quite big, and I reckon that the character could probably stand off the edge and still activate it. I don't want that. I want to make sure my character is actually on the button before it activates. I don't want any sort of false positive activations, so I'm going to leave that quite cozy in the middle. So what we're going to do now is let's go to the event graph. So with the box selected on the left, what you can do is go down on the right hand side on the details, and if you have got the box selected, you should have these options. So you've got on component begin overlap and end overlap. We want both of these, so let's start with the begin, and then let's select the box again and then go to end overlap. So now you've got these two overlap events. So essentially, if anybody stands within that box who has a generate overlap events enabled, they should trigger this. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to check to see if the right types of characters are standing on our pressure plate. Now, if you are only ever going to stand on it and you don't need cubes or any other objects to stand on it, what you could do is you could cast to your third person character, and then basically anything that is not a third person character would fail. So that singles it out to this. But I'm probably going to want a selection of objects like cubes and my character to stand on it. So what I'm actually going to do is the actor which is going to stand on my pad, I'm going to assign a tag to it called pressure pad, and then what I'm going to do is type in has tag. So actor as tag, and then the tag that I'm going to set is going to be, let's say, pressure pad, something like that. And I'm just going to copy this tag, and because I'm going to need to put that on my character. So what I'm saying is, let's do a branch. If the actor that's overlapped it has a tag called pressure pad is true, then I want to animate my button. So if that's true, I want to add a timeline. I want to call it move, similarly to how we did the ramp. We're going to double click on move. I'm going to change the track length this time to 0.5, and then I'm going to add a track, add a float track. Similarly to before, I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to click, and I'm going to click again near the end. I'm going to set my time to 1, my value to, oh sorry, not the time to 1, my time should be 0.5, and then for the first dot we want this to be 0. Zoom to fit, and I'm going to select auto. So just because I sped through that a little bit, my track length is 0.5, my first dot is at 0, 0, and my top dot is going to be at 0.51. And also your track name here, I didn't rename that, but I'm going to go back now and rename that to alpha. And that's pretty much it. So let's close that. So again, we've got a move template with an alpha. Except the only difference is this alpha is only half a second rather than a full second. And that's because I don't want a whole second, I don't want my animation to run over a whole second for the button, because I want it to be quite reactive to me standing on it. A second's quite a long time for sort of like a button press to run over. But again, you can go into this timeline and play around with that time and see what suits you better. This might be too quick for you. Again, it might even still be too slow for you, but just narrow this down. So when we update, what we want to do is we're going to want to set the location. Now, the good thing about this is because our button is a child of our sort of button base, so because our button base never moves, but our button is a child of this because it's in the hierarchy, we can actually, instead of doing world location, we can set its relative location. So relative is basically how my location differs to my parent. So it's not what it is in the world, it's what it is in compared to its parent. So at the moment, 0, 0, 0 is exactly where it is. If I move this button up by 10, in the world, it might actually be 400 and odd, but in relation to its parent, it's only 65 here as an example. So if that confused you, I'm sorry, but I just wanted to make clear what relative means, really. So again, let's split this location, and we're going to want a lerp. So let's get a lerp. Let's plug in our alpha. So let's find out where our default location is. So with this selected, let's just make sure that is correct. So our default location is going to be 5. That's that. And then when it's pressed, what we want is, now we don't want 0, because what's going to happen is the two objects are going to be merged with inside each other. And as you can see here, that's not rendered correctly. So if we actually put 0.1, the button will be ever so slightly above the pressure plate and they won't fight for render space. So I think that's going to be our sort of our pressed number. So 5's our default, so that's fine. So let's go back. So A should be 5 because that's our default, and then we want to move down to 0.1. So that's our return value. Now, because we're doing relative location here, we don't actually need to change the X and the Y because these should remain 0. So what we can do now is to get the button to unpress itself, we just want to do the reverse when we get off the button. So essentially, let's copy these, let's paste it, go to other actor, true, let's move these down a little bit, and if a pressure pad tagged actor gets off our box is true, we want to do the reverse. So let's hit compile and let's just play. Now this shouldn't work, so if we stand on it, nothing should happen. Now the ramp just came up because we're still setting it, we're still activating it on a delay, so that's fine. Now our pressure pad doesn't work because our actor doesn't have a tag of pressure pad. So what we're going to do is, if you haven't already, just select your tag and copy it. Go to your third person character. Select your third person character at the top of your components. And then just type in the word tag. Now you can see here, this is my old tag. Now I've purposely put pads previously. I'm just going to remove the S and I should have the right tag. So under tags, add an element, add pressure pad, hit compile, and now we've got to play. When I stand on this, it should activate, which it has. And then when I get off it, it should deactivate. So we've done the animation part. All we need to do now is we need to link the two together. So linking the two together is actually very simple. We just need to use what's called an event dispatcher. Now an event dispatcher really is it's a notification system in a sense of you can activate it to send out a signal to say I've done something, and then within either the same blueprint or another blueprint you can do something with that information. So in this instance we're going to send out a notification to say I've been activated, And then in our ramp, we're going to say, right, well, now you've been activated, I'm going to move the ramp so then you can cross the bridge or get to where you need to go. So, when we stand on the box, if the active as pressure pad is true, we want to trigger a sort of notification to move our ramp. So let's just move these back just a little bit. Now, what I'm going to do is under event dispatchers here in the bottom left, we're going to press add, and I'm going to call this switch activated. And then I'm going to have another one called switch deactivated. Activated. Sorry, a bit of a spelling issue there. And then what we'll do is we'll just drag the switch onto our blueprint. Switch activated, sorry. And we're going to select call. And we're going to plug that into true. And then play. And then again, with switch deactivated, when we have the end overlap, we're going to call that. And then we're going to plug this into reverse. Okay, so what we've got here is we've got two event dispatchers, one for the activation and one for the deactivation. And that's pretty much it for this pressure pad. So let's compile and save. And then for the triggered ramp, we need to do something very similar. Now, for us to access that event dispatcher, what we need to do is we need to make a reference to our pressure pad. Now, this is what links them together. So under our variables, if we add a new component, and let's call this one switch, and we're going to set this to type pressure pad. Oh, what's happened? Pressure pad. Oh, well, it's pressure plate, actually. My bad. Pressure pad was my previous one. So that's pressure pad. Now, if you wanted to sort of have like multiple switches that could activate this, what you could do is you could set this just to a plain basic actor reference and then follow along with the next bit. But because I'm exclusively having this ramp triggered by a pressure pad or pressure plate, I'm going to change this to pressure plate. Pressure plate, there we go. But if you do set it to actor, the next bit is exactly the same. So don't worry about that. So if you hit compile, because you've made that variable, when you hit compile, it allows you to edit it. So I want to check this as instance editable and expose on spawn. And hit compile again. So let's grab our switch and get switch. And because our switch is set as pressure plate, this blueprint system knows that pressure plate has these activation and deactivation. So now what we can do is let's just make a bit more room and let's get rid of our delay. What we need to do is when we hear that notification that it's been activated, we need to bind an event to that. So if you type in bind and then activated, you should get here bind event to switch activated. So what this is saying is if I ever get a notification that this switch has been activated, I'm going to do this event. And this event's going to be a custom event. And we're going to say move up. And let's add this to our event begin play. And then similarly, what we want to do is we want to bind and then deactivated. So if you double click on this blue line here, you can add a reroute node, make it look a bit nicer. Connect them up. And again, we're going to want another event. And this is going to be a custom event. And this one's going to be move down. So what we want to do now is just move all of this up slightly. And move down is going to be here. So if we get activated, we want to move the ramp up, which for us is going to be us playing. And if it's deactivated, we want to reverse that and move it back down. So now what happens is, as soon as we get this activation, this is going to fire. And then it's going to play our animation. And then if we get off and we deactivate it, we're going to reverse that and move the ramp down. So let's hit compile and play. And then if we now stand on the ramp, sorry, on the pressure pad. Ooh. Oh, I know what we've not done. Very naughty. I'm very sorry about that. What we need to do is we need to make that association with which switch it is. So actually on your map, now because my ramp's underneath the ground, I'm just going to need to go through the outliner over here and look for ramp. So here we go, triggered ramp. Now, when we made that switch variable, we exposed it and made it editable. So with your ramp selected, if you scroll down, you should have here under a default heading switch. So what you can do is, because I've made it pressure pad, if I use the drop down menu, because I've only got one pressure pad in my game, that is the one that I'm going to be able to select. Now at this point, if you selected actor as its type instead, you will probably get a list this long up here with every actor that you've got in your game, and you just want to select the type of switch or activation that is going to be appropriate for you. So you should be able to select pressure plate if you followed me exactly, or select whichever one you've got if you've got it as actor. So because that association's now been made, these two are technically linked together, and only this pressure plate can activate this ramp, or if you've got a door or anything like that. So if we hit play now, we shouldn't get an error message. When we stand on this, our ramp activates, and when we get off, our ramp deactivates. So now let's move on to these cubes and get these to activate it too. Okay, so these cubes. Now, what you could do is, essentially they're going to need a tag called pressure plate. So anything that you're going to want in your game to activate your pressure plate or your button or whatever you've got, you're going to need it to have the same tag as pressure plate. So here I've already added the tag pressure pads, but I'm going to remove the S and have pressure pad, which is what we've set this up as. Now, if you've got tons of objects in your game that you need to sort of set these on, obviously with tags still typed in, you could click on all of these and go through and set it. What I do recommend you do though is just do one and then hold Alt and recreate all the other ones, and what they'll do is they'll have that tag already in them by default. So we've got all those and they're all now ready to go. Just get straight onto the pressure pad. Now I will show you with this. So if I pick one up, bring it over here, whoa, let it stop jiggling around, let go of it. Whoa, obviously I didn't get that on pressure pad, did I? There we go. You can see that it's just activated it, but I've knocked it off, so let's move that over a little bit. And there you go, it's activated it. Now that's pretty much it. But if you want to know how I picked up this this cube the way I did, just keep watching. But if you was only here for the pressure pad, thanks for watching, and please subscribe and consider commenting. And if there's any issues, you know, just let me know. But for those who want to add this to the game, let's just get sorted. Okay, so this is actually all the entire blueprint which makes the portal style grab actually possible. And like I said at the beginning, I'm not going to talk through every element that makes it work. If you do want more information about it, pop a comment down below and I might make a video on talking through it. But just for simplicity's sake, what I've done is I've uploaded it to Blueprint UE. And the good thing about this is, if you've never seen this, is it's a great way for people to share the blueprint. And there's some really good stuff on here if you're lucky to find it. Anyway, so what you can do is you can just come down here and you can just copy the code. So you can press this button and it should copy it to your clipboard. And what you can do is, I'm actually going to delete this entire thing and just show you how to implement it as you would. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to delete all of these variables which I know it relies on, just so then you get exactly the same thing that I'm about to show you. So what you'd do is you'd press paste now, and that'll paste in everything that I created, and just hit compile. First thing you should do, hit compile, and they'll be red everywhere. because there's loads of variables that this relies on, and you need to create all these. So best thing to do is just to go around and just look at all the bits of red. So here, physics handle. Now if you right click over the text, what it'll do is sorry, no, I've made a mistake there. If you right click not on the text, it'll say create variable. If you click that and then hit compile, some of your red errors have already gone. So here again, physics object, right click on the not on the text and create variable physics object. Hit compile and there's less red on the screen. So then just keep doing that and move over. So here we've got physics handle, create, compile, that's disappeared. Physics object types, right click, create, compile. And what else have we got? Handle location, right click, create, compile. And then by the looks of it, that is pretty much all the issues gone. Now there is just a couple more things that you need to change, and that is, I've got this set to run off my right mouse button. If you don't want that, obviously you need to change that. You might just need to link up this release because it was separated by a reroute node, and for whatever reason, every time you paste it, that's broken, which is bizarre. I don't know if I've done something whilst uploading it and messed it up, but you just need to tag this one back up. The physics object types, because you've compiled now, you need to actually select a type, add an array element and change this to physics bodies. Now essentially the reason for that is this system relies on physics objects. So because these cubes in the world, these chamfered cubes, have let me just show you here, under physics they have simulate physics set up, so they are a physics body, and this system really relies on that. So if you're trying to pick something up and it doesn't work, it's because it's probably not a physics body, and you might just need to remove this or change this line trace for a by channel. I'm not too sure, I can't guarantee that'll work because this has been set up with physics bodies in mind. But that if something's not working, it's because it may not be a simulated physics object. And I feel like that might be everything you need. If you're not happy with where the object is sort of like swinging around from, my line trace is set up to be 250 units in front of my character. It's not a very long line trace. Like if I hit compile and play, you can see that my line trace is not very far. Essentially, I don't really want to be picking anything up that's out of my sort of reach. So you can see here, I've already got it tested, and it works. So like I said, if you want to change that, just change the sort of distance that the line trace is set to. If you want to separate these, the handle location is actually where the is where the distance, or where it grabs from, or where the distance it grabs from is. You just need to recreate this distance here where it links to it and just change that value. That's pretty much it. I said I weren't going to talk through it, but yeah, that's it pretty much set up. Have a play around with it, and I hope that helped you. So if it did, please consider giving me a like, leave a comment down below. You know, I appreciate when people say thank you. It's really nice. If you want to chat with me, there's some social links down below. I'm on Discord mainly. There's a group of us now. I think there's nearly 20 people, so we are growing, which is really good. If you want to support me, there is also a Patreon link down below. I do post the project files on there. There is a link down below where you can get the project files, so you can have all of this. But that's exclusive to the Patreons. That is supported on all Patreon levels, so even my cheapest, which I think is about £1, or which is about maybe $1 something. Anyway, I appreciate all your support for those who have already become a Patreon. And that's pretty much it. So thank you for watching to the end, and I'll see you in another video next Sunday.